the internal debate, touch points or journeys, what's the difference? Well, um, let me walk you through my perception of the difference. And also I'll throw in some McKinsey. McKinsey also did an article where they compared the best way to enhance satisfaction. And their conclusion was aligned with mine, that you really need to enhance the journey to have the biggest impact, and you should not enhance the satisfaction of separate touch points. Let me explain why. So a touch point, what is a touch point? A touch point is a step in the journey. For example, the touch point when I call the call center, a touch point where the account manager visits, right? The touch point of the website. So I have different websites, different touch points, and often driven by survey tooling companies. They then say they create a super sexy dashboard. They place the touch points in the order of the journey, and then they say, hey, look, we have mapped and measured your journey. But trust me, when you're measuring separate touch points, that's something very different from measuring the entire journey. An example that I like to use is the following from the customer service. Why a touchpoint measurement is different than the journey. So let's say I call the call center and I have a question. And I ask, dear employee, can you send me form X because I lost a copy? The employee says, of course, Zana, I'll send it to you right away. A touchpoint measurement would measure directly after the call, would ask me a few questions, and I would be super happy because the employee was friendly and they were going to fix my problem. But then 4 or 5 days later, if I never received that form, I'm not happy, but you're not measuring this, right? So what you tend to see is that the touchpoint scores are super high, because you cannot see whether the promise that was made or whether something that was supposed to be delivered actually has happened. That's one of the key issues with the touchpoint measurements. The other issue is the scope. So when you start measuring touch points, it's often like 2 or 3 questions, and it's really transactional. While what we see, we also in our driver analysis, check the video on the driver analysis, we also map the journey and the transactional steps. So maybe I start with filling out something on the website, I order something, maybe somebody approaches me and it's delivered at home, right? So we have all these different touch points. I always say, please don't use the word touch point. We have those different steps in the journey. We put that in our survey, but we also add a lot of statements around the emotions of the customer. And because we put everything in one survey and we're not measuring them separately, that's the only way where you get an integrated view where, hey, if we measure the emotions and all the different steps in the journey, when we place them all together, hey, now we see that, for example, the human aspect is 3 times more important than the ease of the online form. So the risk of measuring separate touch points is that you think maybe they're important, but you're not analyzing them as a whole, as one integrated view. So it's really crucial to be aware that just measuring the separate touch points, it's not the same as measuring the journey. So what we tend to do is we don't do any touch point measurement, or we don't measure the separate steps in the journey. We measure the journey as a whole, figure out what elements of the steps have the biggest impact, and then we measure, let's say, the top 10 statements that had the biggest impact on the journey and the experience of the customer. What do we see 9 out of 10 times? That those emotional topics that are not connected to one of the separate steps, but they are across the entire journey, give me personal attention. Company X gave me personal attention. Company X is there for me when I need them. That's not a separate step in the journey. If that is a driver, you want to make sure that you translate that driver, that feeling of being there for customers, in each step in the journey. How can that confirmation email give them a sense of being there for them? How can the website text give a sense of being there for them? How can an account manager, when they call them, give a sense of being there for them? Right, so be very careful. Ideally, delete the word touch points from your vocabulary and talk about journeys and the drivers that have the biggest impact on the journeys, and talk about channels, right? So customer service, call, email, app, those are channels you want to measure, right? So touch points is just a very confusing, at least I see that in practice, it's a very confusing mix of channels and steps in the journey. Okay, I hope that's helpful for you to sort of, make the matrix of which measurements do I need to really be in the driving seat of enhancing the experience of your customers.